911/999 dispatch. What's the dumbest reason someone has called? Because their electricity went out and they wanted the police to fix it, then got upset when I told them they needed to call their power company. I've also had someone call because their neighbor's tree was dropping leaves into their yard and they wanted the neighbor to clean it up. And one of the funniest, most ridiculous, because someone's automatic sprinklers turned on while they were walking their dog and they got wet. Wanted to press and all charges. People call for the most petty things ever. I would always have them call back on the non-emergency line as soon as they told me the ridiculousness. 911 is for emergencies only, boys and girls. And one of the funniest, most ridiculous, because someone's automatic sprinklers turned on while they were walking their dog and they got wet. Wanted to press and all charges. What the? But I'm allergic to water. I'll literally die. My cousin had that allergy. I threw some scalding water on him and he started developing red patches and blisters. My aunt worked on these in the 80s. She said a woman once called saying her gravy had gone cold. This is my favorite. Was she asking for help? Did she want a replacement gravy? Just needed to let someone know? Her logic was the gravy went cold too quickly, so there must be an issue with the kettle. My aunt said the fire brigade aren't going to come out and fix your kettle. Just buy a new kettle. Is putting gravy in a kettle normal where you're from? Not dispatch, but I used to field emergency court in the UK. Emergency court is more or less 24-hour walk-in. It's strictly for cases that can't wait to be heard in regular court. Deportation, life support, emergency custody, serious stuff. That did not dissuade some dude from turning up and demanding that we stop his neighbor's cat from trespassing on his land though. He ended up being fined later for repeatedly calling 999 over it. I was doing IT work at a dispatch center when a 911 call came in from a woman who said that she came home and heard a burglar upstairs. This was in a small town that doesn't get much crime. The town sent 5 of their own cops, plus they requested mutual aid from 2 neighboring towns. A total of about 10 officers cordoned off the area and set up a perimeter. Cops went into the house looking for the burglar. They found that the noise was caused by a Roomba that got trapped in a closet. The vacuum was banging against the walls and the closet door trying to escape. No arrests were made that day. Fortunately, no one was injured either. Okay, I laughed out loud at this one. Confession. I have thought multiple times that my Roomba running upstairs, that my husband started randomly via the app on his phone, was a burglar. Man, that would scare me if my husband did that. There are times where I wonder what the hell the noise upstairs is, and I'm the one who turned the Roomba on. No arrests were made that day, so the Roomba just got away with it, left free to terrorize some other poor, unsuspecting victim. Terrible. I will never forget that brief period in early 2018 when KFC ran out of chicken and police in the UK received so many calls about it that they had to put out a notice asking people to stop. What exactly did they think the police could do about KFC's lack of chicken? When that was happening, I thought it was crazy. If that happened now, I wouldn't bat an eyelid. A guy called because an injured bear was in his front yard for a few hours. It was a giant landscaping boulder that had been there for years. Whoa, what was he on and where can I buy some? Are you sure you want that? People call us all the time because they are not from a rural area, and they think their 2-wheel drive vehicle can't go over our mountain roads. They get stuck, and somehow think because they are on federal ground that we are obligated to help them. We are not. Usually, these brainiacs who take their 1988 Accord over forest highways also don't bring anything warm to wear or any extra food either. When they do remember to bring something, it is usually a child that won't do well in the cold overnight. And when they get stuck and learn that AAA does not go 50 miles off of the pavement to come save you, they really start to panic. Either you have $3,000 for a private tow to maybe come get you, a long hike out, or you are truly in danger and then maybe a search and rescue team will come out, at which point you may again receive a bill for their services. People, just come a little bit prepared, please. When they do remember to bring something, it is usually a child that won't do well in the cold overnight. Your wording here is glorious. I love these calls, but only because the towers people hit from BFE are usually so outdated that they don't transmit phase 2 data, so no lat long. I love figuring out where someone is when they can't tell you where they are. Pro tip: if they have enough service to call in, they can usually navigate to findmazer.com in their phone's web browser. I have used this a number of times. Have them put it on speaker, go to that site, and have them push the button to switch format to whatever your CAD uses. Works great. I had a woman call and tell me a UFO had landed in her driveway. I was a little taken aback, so I asked her to describe it while I dispatched officers using her exact wording. Of course officers scoffed but still went en route. She said there was a silver metallic object that came out of the sky and landed in her drive. Officers arrived on scene and there was a silver metallic object in her driveway. It was dark out at this time, so they approached it and found it to be a weather balloon. So it could actually be classed as a UFO. It had instructions on how to return it, so officers returned it a few days later. I imagine that happens fairly often. Was this woman hysterical or pretty chill? I'd say she was more excited than anything. She was able to answer questions but laughed a lot and repeatedly said, "I know this sounds crazy. This sounds like a good time." I was at a friend's house when his techie neighbor accidentally crash landed a small experimental drone in his backyard. It didn't look like a drone as we know. This thing was shiny and looked like the classic UFO design. We were laughing hysterically at the thought of 5-inch aliens trying to invade Earth. There are apparently multiple people each month who think they can call the emergency number asking for the police to give them a ride home because they got plastered at a bar and don't want to drink and drive. Actually, this kinda was me once. My car broke down on a back road in New Hampshire one time. Late at night, I was 20 minutes out from the nearest decent sized town, and 25 minutes from home. I called AAA for a tow. They contacted NH State Police so that my dead car wasn't sitting on the side of a sheer drop on a road where people go 40-50 miles per hour. Oh. And no hazard lights because my alternator died. A nice state trooper showed up, shot the shit with me and my husband while we waited for a tow. Once the truck showed up, I asked him for a taxi company number. This was pre-Uber, so the chances of me getting that taxi at 10 PM in rural NH was slim. He kinda looked at us like, I probably shouldn't, but, so we got to ride home in a state trooper cruiser. It was fun. Those things can really go fast and stay in control on windy, steep NH roads. Okay, have to know. Did you sit in the front or the back? Well, there were 3 people. State trooper, OP, and husband. And the car probably only had 2 front seats. So someone sat in the back and it almost certainly wasn't the state trooper. I had a guy call 911 and wanted to report that a woman had stolen his money. We were swamped at night, so I kept him on the line trying to get further information. Upon asking a few more questions about the woman and her description, it was obvious he was describing a prostitute. He then began to cry and begged me to not judge him for hiring a prostitute. I promised him I wouldn't judge him and I would send him an officer as soon as we had one available. He hung up and I ended the call as the woman was no longer on scene. He called back on 911 less than a minute later and proceeded to want to talk about his hiring a prostitute until officers arrived. My partner and I continued to pick up his call after we had to place him on hold several times to take other 911 calls during the 15-minute period it took for officers to get to him. He ended up getting arrested for disorderly conduct that night as he was extremely intoxicated and decided he wanted to have a go at the officers when they arrived. Is it not illegal to hire a prostitute where you're from? Yes, it is. However, this was years ago and he wasn't charged with that crime since there was no victim there to make a statement. Fascinating. Admitting to it on a recorded line wasn't enough evidence? Little old lady would call every morning to ask what the weather was like outside. No matter how many times we told her to stop, a grown man wanted to press charges against someone who flipped him off while driving. Every morning to ask what the weather was like outside. Was she in an interior apartment? I think just old and lonely. Or, I need someone to help me take the lasagna out of the oven. I have no mitts. Who doesn't have some towels or an old shirt to use instead? Surely they weren't wearing every piece of fabric in their house. Even if they were, it isn't like you can't take your cloths off and use them. Move the oven mitts. She got shampoo in her eye while showering. She rinsed it out, and her vision was unaffected, but it, really stung for a minute. She was 27 and could not be talked out of having paramedics dispatched. When the medics got there, they couldn't talk her out of going to the hospital. She was fine, at least until she got word from her insurance company that they weren't going to pay for her frivolous and unnecessary ambulance ride. Oh hey, I work in ambulance billing. I get the other side of that call, which is a patient and her mother Karen calling to yell at me because insurance won't pay for the stupid and unnecessary ambulance ride. I tell them the trip has been deemed not medically necessary, and they can appeal to insurance. However, the bill is $XXXX, and they need to make payment before it goes to collections. When I get, well, I thought it was medically necessary to take said bullshit trip, they get, okay, that makes them crazy. No, we won't change the coding so Princess Snowflake Fragile Flowers insurance will pay. Not happening. No, there's no discount for stupid. No, I don't have any sympathy for you. It's your bill, and it's not my credit. And when they start cussing me out, I politely tell them, you absolutely will not speak to me like that. I am ending this call, which makes them explode. I use top hindest with medical billing, just checking codes and confirming diagnoses, not dealing with patients. I overheard some phone calls from people who did have contact with patients, and I have no idea how you put up with that shit. Although I'm sure there has to be a code for patient is a fragile snowflake princess and can't be reasoned with an ICD-10. V97.33XD, sucked into jet engine. Subsequent encounter. W56.22XA, bitten by orca. Initial encounter. They are so very specific. Once was on a team that built an app that connected with the ICD-10 database. All the unit test patients we made had the weirdest diagnosis because that was super funny to us after working on the thing for months. I'm not a 911 dispatcher, but I called at like age 3 and asked an officer what 5 plus 7 was at my grandma's. Another one was when my grandma had to hit me because I almost touched a hot stove, and when she was done cooking and went outside to do her garden I called the police and told them she hit me. Long story short, the police arrived 15 to 20 minutes later thinking I was being abused to it just being me almost touching a hot stove.